So in lifting, the CNS is, I think, a fascinating topic because we think about like how much is the CNS working versus the PNS working, the nerves that are in your leg. So like everyone's heard of sciatica, right? Like everyone's heard of someone having sciatica. That's the sciatic nerve. The sciatic nerve is a peripheral nerve.
Yeah.
And so obviously, because we've all heard of people having this pain down their leg, we know that the PNS is involved in movement or sensation or something in the leg. But like how much is the brain controlling and how much is the peripheral nervous system controlling? So
Right.
we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. But in lifting, the CNS is basically just the used because the muscle contractions start in the brain.
Yes.
The brain produces electrical signals. Those signals go down your brainstem and your spinal cord and then out to the nerves. And they fire the motor neurons, which excite the muscle fibers and make them contract.
Mm-hmm. And this all happens within split of a second. I mean,
second.
a split of a second.
Right.
By the time you've thought about it, basically everything's moving.
Right.
What you were thinking of moving has moved.
That's right. Yep. And so the stress that's placed on the CNS is directly proportional to the load that you're attempting to lift. So the heavier you train, the greater the CNS response, basically.
Yeah. Which can be, I mean, think of it similar to just your muscles, right? If you are putting more and more stress on your muscles, as we talked about many times before, your body's response is to put on more strength and to put on more muscle. I think we're going to get into this, but your CNS can't really put on more nerves.
Right.
So there has to be other ways for it to handle that stress.
Yeah, for it to adapt.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to break down some different terms that are used in the CNS and how certain types of training can improve on those things. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first thing that we need to talk about is a motor unit, which is basically just a special unit in the muscles that activates a group of muscle cells. It's pretty simple. It just transmits the signals from the brain to the muscle fibers to contract. So what's interesting is that research has shown that training with loads over 90% of your 1 rep max is the best way to increase the number of motor units activated. That also triggers a response of anabolic hormones from your endocrine system. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really interesting to talk about, is that you can actually train how many of these motor units get activated through lifting heavy.
Yeah. If you think about it, kind of makes sense. Your body, it's not very efficient for your body to use all of your motor units all at the same time. So if it can be selective in how many it needs at 60%, it's not going to give you what you would do at 90% at 60%. That's very inefficient.
Right.
So that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, our bodies are all about preservation and preserving resources. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't have to use all of the motor units, why will it?
Yeah. We have frugal bodies.
Yeah. They're efficient, not frugal.
Oh, true.
So high load training better conditions the nervous system to transmit those electrical signals from the brain to the muscles. So it increases the force those muscles can produce to a greater extent than does low load training.
Right.
So the next thing we need to talk about is something called rate coding. So this is the rate at which those motor units are activated. And it's also really important in generating strength. So the faster that you activate those motor units, the quicker that you generate strength. And we witness this as explosive power. Mm-hmm. So obviously some people are naturally like really, really explosive and some people are not, but you can train the level of explosiveness. And the best way to train this is a combination of lifting heavy weights as well as moving slightly lighter weights, but extremely quickly. Mm-hmm. So 90% of your 1 rep max would be a way to work on the rate coding, as well as training 80% of your 1 rep max, but moving it as fast as you possibly can without sacrificing technique. Mm-hmm. So I have to say that this is one thing that since I was an Olympic lifter, which I really don't train Olympic lifting at all in like the last 6 months.
Right.
But that's one thing that I've carried over is trying to move very quickly.
Yep.
Even if even if it's a heavy weight, obviously a heavy weight's not going to move as quick as a lightweight, but trying to move my body as fast as I possibly can while still having, everything tight and not like loosey-goosey kind of movement, I think has helped me make significant gains in strength.
Mm-hmm. So at 60%, we shouldn't be grinding things. 60%
right.
should be up and down, boom.
Right. And I have said a lot in the past that I'm a real grindy type of lifter. And what I don't mean by a grindy type of lifter is like moving all of my weights really, really slow and making all of them look heavy. What I say by meaning that I'm a grindy lifter is that I have the ability to stick with and grind out a really heavy weight. Like it doesn't scare me to just be stuck under a bar for a couple of seconds that's not moving. I can grind that out. And so you always want to be trying to move as fast as possible. It's just sometimes going to actually be fast and sometimes not going to be fast. But the more you can fire up those muscles as quickly as possible, the more you're going to generate strength through rate coding, which is basically another way to summarize that is saying that like greater activation of fast twitch fibers increases your speed and strength during physical activity. So over time, your resistance training develops a communication between your brain and your fast twitch motor units, enabling greater activation of those muscle fibers. And so these types of neuromuscular adaptations can occur within weeks of a new strength training program, which is pretty awesome. And you'll notice that particularly if someone is like learning, even for those of us that are experienced lifters, just learning a new movement, the first week that you do it versus the fourth week that you do it, someone could look at you and see that you're so much more proficient in that movement, that you're able to move it so much better. And this is one thing that I notice in my accessory lifts in my programming is that from week to week, I'm able to increase my weight on my accessories so much. And I think a lot of it is these neurological adaptations, whereas like the first time I do something, my brain is like, what? I'm not very coordinated. It's like, we do what? But then give me 3 or 4 weeks of doing that and I'll be much, much stronger because my brain is understanding how to control my muscles the way that it needs to.